Welcome back, everyone, to the Hattie Boydle podcast. I am very excited about today's topic. And before I go into it, I actually just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has reached out to me and shared something that has related to you in the previous podcasts and episodes that I have released. And if you like what I'm saying, please share it. Please tell your friends. Please reach out to me because I love a good conversation and I always want to know what you're loving about the topics or the things that I'm sharing, because I'm going to tell you a little secret. Everything that I share with you guys is the conversations that I have amongst my best friends, the conversations that I have with my clients, the conversations that I have within myself, the experiences that I've had, the troubles, the challenges, but of course, the things that have helped me move through it. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And today's topic is really interesting. It is standard versus expectation. And it's a conversation that I have with so many of my clients all the time. And I'm just going to share with you what my interpretation is of standard versus expectation. And I'm curious if this lands for you. And if it doesn't, please let me know, because I'd love to hear what your experience is. But also if it lands, I would love to know that too, because I'm going to ask a couple of questions amongst the stories that I share today, because I want you to be able to take these episodes and really embody it within yourself and say, well, where in my life am I applying these things? Where in my life am I feeling like I'm either failing, or where is my challenge with failure? Or even today, where in my life do I notice that I have a standard of myself versus an expectation? So my opinion of standard versus expectation is that a standard is something that we can practice. An expectation is something that we imagine. It's an imagination of who we think we should be, where we think we should, who we think we are, right? How we think things are going to go, right? And the standard is something how we can show up. It's very lived. It's something that we can create. You often hear me say, I have high standards of myself. I know how to meet them. There's something that are integrated within myself. There's something that I can practice. It's something that I can live by. Whereas an expectation, you might notice, and this is something that I notice, is that it's quite judgmental. It's also this thing that I've created in my mind. And so how this came about was I just listened to clients all the time. And so many of them have this imagination of how they think you should be. And that's what actually stops people from taking action, or it just stops people from trying completely. We have expectations of ourselves. We have expectations of others. Others have expectations of us. And that one might really land for you, especially if it's cultural, religious. We even have expectations of how people think we might be because of the people that we associate ourselves with, or the brands that we associate ourselves with. Or even we might notice that there might be an expectation that we create in our mind about how we should be being in certain environments. But on the flip side, we might notice that we raise our standard because of the people that we're in. So in today's episode, we're going to break down all these things, and we're going to start with our own expectations of ourselves and our own standards. So an expectation is something that we imagine. It's actually quite judgmental. Sometimes it feels unrelenting. And it's very external, or it feels very external to us or to myself. An expectation is something where we go, I should be like that. Why can't you just? You've done it before. We might notice expectation of who we are now and who we've been before creates this really big gap. And it creates judgment and comparison. And it can be really unfair. Right? Because when we have this expectation of ourselves, but we haven't got a practice or a standard of how we get there, it's just an imagination. And we'll use words like just, why can't you? Why haven't I? Why haven't I? Why can't you just? You've done it before, so why can't you just do it now? And in the same thing, when we make this expectation of how we think something is going to be, like, again, unrealistic expectations, what does it do for us? We become sad, lost, let down, turned off. We move away. This happens so much with clients when they have this expectation of what they think they're going to look like when they've lost the 5 kilos, or an unrealistic expectation of a time frame it might take to change their body. This is a really big thing, especially amongst the social media, where we do see highlight reels. We only see the beginning and the end. Not many people share the in-between, the messiness, the chaos that happens in between. It's the perfect conditions, the perfect photo, the perfect of this. And then we're met with this unrealistic expectation of that's how we think we should be. And then in that moment, we can rob ourselves. We can say, oh, hold on. If I didn't get it like this, then I'm not good enough. Maybe I shouldn't try again. When we have a standard of ourselves, a standard is something that we get to practice. It's something that we get to own ourselves. So when people come to Flex Method, one of the first things I say is, we're not expecting you to be perfect. It's like the first thing I say. I just want you to know, I have no expectation that you're going to be perfect, because I also don't have that expectation on myself. I don't have it on any client either. I certainly don't have it on my partner. Our expectation of you is not that you're going to be perfect. It's actually that you're going to be imperfect. But what we're going to encourage you to do is have a standard of yourself, have a standard of practice. And my standard is I will practice. I will practice every day. Now, you can have an expectation of the standard that you practice. And this is actually where I think, how do we kind of mold and shift expectation and standard? They can mold and shift. It doesn't have to be rigid in one way, because I think it is healthy to have an expectation of ourselves, of a practice, of a standard, which is, for me, I will do the best that I can in any given moment. That is the standard that I get to practice, and that is also my expectation of myself. So when expectation is met with a standard, it's really powerful. It holds you accountable. But a high standard without self-compassion is just self-bullying. In the same way that I think discipline on its own can feel kind of rigid in a way. Discipline met with respect, discipline met with compassion, very powerful. Actually, that removes expectation, and that takes it into a practice, this practice mindset, which is also incredibly powerful. So I'm actually going to share with you an experience, or I guess an example of where in my life do I notice I have an expectation, and where in my life do I notice that I have standards. And this really came up for me when, even here and now in these podcasts. So one of the episodes that I haven't released yet, I have recorded 3 times. And it's actually, the depth of it is a really great episode. And that's the issue. My challenge is that I haven't got it perfect. Like, I'm trying to give myself this perfect standard when I actually don't have the skills to be perfect. I'm asking myself to be a black belt when I'm not even a blue belt in this arena. I'm trying to hold myself to this really unrelenting expectation instead of practicing a standard, which is I will practice. And I've practiced 3 times and I'm still not happy. So I'm met with this kind of this deficit at the moment. But I still notice in myself that I'm like, you should be. Why can't you just? I can't believe I. And these are all imaginations. These are all expectations of how I think I should be. Because it's not that I'm starting from scratch. I've done seminars. I've been on stages. I'm a world-class athlete. I talk to clients every day. There's parts of me that go, why can't I just talk to the camera the way I talk to my girls in Zoom? It's a different environment. I love seeing people on the other side. If I had all you guys sitting here, I'd probably do a better job. But I'm in the practice. And every day I commit to showing up every single week to practice here. I'm practicing that standard that I will practice. But I still notice there's a part of me that has an expectation that I should be better. And my question to my clients this week, and my question to you guys here and now, is where in your life do you notice that you have this expectation? This imagination of how you think you should be. And where in your life do you notice that you have a practice mindset? You have a standard of yourself that might be high, that might still in some ways feel unrelenting, but you know how to get there. So an example of that piece for me is training. I have an incredibly high standard of myself when it comes to training. But I hate the word earning, but I've earned that for myself. Because I've done it so many times, because I've practiced it so many times. I know how I have to show up for myself. I know the standard of my practice. I know what I expect of myself. That is where I can take expectation and meet standard and go, yeah, that is still in a container. It's not an imagination. It's what I know how to practice. It would be different of myself if I expected myself to be strong and not warm up. That's an imagination of how I thought I was sheep, but I didn't meet the standard of practice. But when it comes to training, and that's where I feel so empowered, that's where life could be chaotic and I will show up to training and I will meet my standard every time. And some days it will pull so much out of me and I'll be so exhausted by it, but I'll still walk away and say, I practice that high standard. I did the thing. So in that area of my life, that's where I really have a standard of myself because in many ways, I've earned that for myself. I've shown myself over and over and over again what I'm capable of. It's not an imagination. It's not an expectation. But in areas of my life where I'm still imagining things, where I haven't developed the skill, and I'm still trying to practice and find my footing even in my practices, I still have this expectation that I should be better because I'm using a lens of being a world-class athlete into being a speaker, but I haven't had the practice. So I have a really big deficit there. And something that I noticed the other week when I just felt like I wasn't getting it right, I was sitting in expectation and I was feeling so frustrated. I was incredibly judgmental of myself. I had the words of, I can't believe you. Why can't you just? You should be. And I had to ask myself, am I self-bullying or am I holding myself to a standard I know I'm capable of? And last week I said, well, I feel like I'm holding myself to a standard I'm capable of. But that doesn't mean there was little pieces of self-bullying. And it wasn't until Coben asked me, well, what are you going to practice? What do you need to do to make sure that every time you step into an episode, you're able to practice the way that's going to give you the outcome that you want? And so what's beautiful about that is he could pull me out and say, well, what do you want to practice? And when I look at just the women who are incredibly successful, whether that be in their bodies, whether that be in their life, whether that be in their careers, is the thing that makes them so incredibly powerful or be able to maintain a result isn't that they live in expectation. It's that they practice a standard. That's not to say that we are immune to expectations. We are human beings. But they have this ability to adapt. They have this ability to say, what do I want to practice? And that's what we teach in Flex Method. We say to our clients, what would you like to practice? Because we have so many clients come to us and say, I went away, I went from this perfect environment, and then I went home. And I had this expectation that I was just going to be perfect the way I was in my perfect conditions. And then when they didn't meet that expectation, that imagination, because they didn't ask themselves, what do I want to practice? They just made this assumption that it was going to be exactly how it was going to be at home. When they didn't meet the expectation, what happened? They felt overwhelmed. They felt frustrated. They felt like they failed. And then they went into all or nothing. And so the conversation that we had was, well, let's remove expectation that things have to be perfect. Let's remove expectation that we only practice in perfect conditions. Because what I hear is, well, it wasn't like this and it wasn't like this, so I didn't do this. It's like, cool. Life is always going to challenge you. Your schedule's always going to change. Capacity is always going to fluctuate. But in any given moment, we can ask ourselves, what would I like to practice? Remove expectation that we have to be perfect, that things have to be perfect for us to take action. Expectation ruins the ability to have a long-term progress. Standards is something that we can mold and shape and practice. So let's look at it from a different lens. Let's look at it from the expectation that others have on us. It could be from your family. It could be from your friends. It could be from your partner, right? It could be from social media. Something that often gets thrown at me is, you're in the fitness industry, you should be XYZ. You're in the fitness industry, aren't you meant to be all about health? That's if I go out on the weekend, okay? Or I eat something that they have deemed is not healthy. And then their expectation of me, there's a mismatch. And then suddenly I'm a villain. Or suddenly I'm not good enough. Or suddenly I've dropped their expectation. I've been dropped down here. I've challenged their belief about me. You might notice this, if you're a coach and you're out with friends or family and you decide to have a little bit of chocolate, or you're on a diet and you have a little bit of chocolate and your friend goes, aren't you meant to be dieting? Should you be eating that? And you'll go, well, actually, I practice flexible dieting, so I've learned how to, I've actually practiced how to put this into my diet. And that won't make sense to them because they have this expectation that you're this clean eater, or you should be this way, or you can't be lazy, or you should be like this. And we have those expectations on ourselves, right? You should be. Why can't you just? And other people will have it on us, right? Let's look at culture, religions. When our parents have an expectation of us to have a certain career, do a certain job, take the family business, right? For a lot of, I know a lot of Asian cultures, there's an immense amount of expectation on the kids to get good grades, to have a career that's really high paying and deemed as very successful. That is a lot of expectation to put on the children. And how do they feel when they don't meet their parents' expectation? Like they failed, like they're not good enough. How do we develop these stories about ourselves? We develop them as children, right? So many of the expectations or the things that we develop from children into adulthood is from expectations from others. And I think once you can notice that, once you can name that out loud, that's when you begin to have power. Instead of going, well, my expectation is that I should be like this. Well, you have a choice. You can hold that above yourself like in a hanger, or you can say, I notice that that's someone else's expectation of me. But what I truly want, what I would like to practice, my standard of myself is that I want to do this other thing. So you can take expectation, you can name it and notice it, and you can reframe it in a way that is more powerful for you, which becomes, I understand there's an expectation. That might feel unfair. That's okay. That expectation is actually not mine. Let's park that. My standard of myself is this, and this is how I practice it. When we're met with other people's expectations, it can feel really challenging because a part of our biological needs is to be a part of a tribe, is to be connected, is to be loved, is to be seen and heard and felt a part of. is to be relatable to others. And so when we don't meet someone else's expectation, we often feel like we're letting the other person down. But that's really unfair because that's someone else's expectation on us. And I want you to think about the times that you have expectations of others. When you expect someone else to be a certain way. Now, this can be really tricky. When we look at the world, this is something that I struggle with, and it's a conversation I have with a client, which is the way I like to live, which is with kindness, right? To be kind to others, to practice compassion, to minimize judgment and lean into curiosity, to try and understand instead of just constantly judge. Like, notice when I'm judging, because we all have those, and go, I'm curious about this person. I'm curious about how they do this. I'm curious to understand you more. Like, that's the practice when we have our friends. Like, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about you. But most people will meet judgment because someone else is not meeting the expectation of how they think they should be. And we all do it to people. We do it to others. And we might notice it comes from our own standard of what we practice, or it just might be something that we create about someone else. So I'd love for you to notice, where in your life do you have an expectation of others? And does it come from your own standard of yourself? Or when you notice that other people have expectations on you? And how do you notice it? And what can you do to shift the experience of it? Because what other people think about us actually is not our business. It all comes from them. And you're allowed to say, I notice that that's your expectation of me, but that's actually not mine. Actually, this is a thing that I like to practice. As I said before, when someone comes at you with judgment around something that you're doing because they have this imagination of how they think you should be, which is expectation, and you go, that's really interesting. No, I actually practice this. And you can meet them with grace. Instead of being like, I can't believe you think that of me. Or being like, they're judging me. I'm not, and we go into this spiral pattern. Another version of standard versus expectation is the expectation that we should be in another area of our life, or we should be further along than we think we are in life. Okay, when we are going against the construct. Now, I thought about this the other day because I was like, oh my goodness, I got married at the age of 37. Now, I constantly have to remind myself that I'm 37 years old. I honestly feel like I could be 28 or 29, just with the playfulness and just how I feel energetically. Like, I really, life could go by every single year, and if I didn't have a birthday, I just would not have an idea of how old I am. And it was interesting to be like, oh shit, like I got married at 37, and maybe in my early 20s, I thought I would have been married and had kids either in my early 20s or, late 20s or even just earlier 30s. And I was like, wow. What I noticed when I thought about that was, it was just an interesting thing to think about. Now, we also know that these day and age, women are having babies a lot older. The construct is starting to be deconstructed, right? Because women are doing way more things, in the workforce. We're being more independent. We're living our own lives. We're putting families off because we're just not ready. And that's totally okay. But some might still be living in the expectation that we should be somewhere else than where we are in this moment. And what do we notice about ourselves when we do that? We lose curiosity and we go into judgment. Because we might not be meeting our parents' idea of where we think we should be. How many of your parents go, shouldn't you have kids by now? It's probably the first thing that people say to me is like, okay, kids now? It's like, is that what is expected of me because I'm just got married? I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. Not really sure. At the moment, not really happy about how the world's going. Not sure I want to bring someone up into that. And so again, we're met with someone else's expectation from the questions that they ask because that might have been what's expected of them. And I think the point of today is to really just be able to name and notice, when are you met with expectation, whether it's within yourself or from others, or what you do for like the expectation you have on others, and be able to name and notice it and almost depower it with compassion. be able to say, that is really interesting. I notice that I do this thing to myself. I notice that I have this expectation of where I think I should be. And when I think about it with expectation, I might feel a little bit powerless. But instead, if I meet it with curiosity and go, okay, I had this expectation of how I think I should be. But actually, there is life. And what if every day I get to ask myself, like, well, what is the thing I want to practice? How do I feel joy in this moment? Like, actually, how can I create the life that I want to live? Not what my parents want me to live, not what my friends want me to live, what I want to live. When we pull it back, when we anchor it into what would I like to practice? How would I like my life to be? What's the life that I want to live? And then maybe how do I start to create that? You center yourself back into who you are, the values that you have. And that's where you become powerful again. We're always going to be met with expectations of others. We have our own expectations of ourselves. And we don't want to get rid of them either. I don't think having an expectation of yourself is a bad thing. But it has to be met with a standard that you can practice. Because if we think of an expectation up here and we don't have something to practice, it reminds me of just like having a box up really high and you can't reach it. But if we had an expectation with a standard, in my imagination now, as I think about that, I'm like, you can see the box up high, but there's a ladder on how you get there. There's steps that you practice to meet that expectation, which I think is really, really powerful too. Another one to think about, which is internal, which is, and a lot of mothers do this, but I've also done this to myself, is when we have expectations of how we think we should be based off previous versions of ourselves. And essentially that's like the act to compare. So there's comparison in there, but it's met with expectation. And again, you're going to notice that you use that language. I've done it before, so I should. You've done it before, so you should. Why can't I just be like I was? I used to be able to. That's something I've said to myself, especially when, I even notice I can say it now. I used to have bigger legs. Why can't my legs be big now? I used to be strong. Why aren't I strong now? And this word used to is really condescending. Like it literally just pulls us down. And so again, when we're met with expectation has a certain language. It's got a certain tone. It's got a certain sharpness to it. It's not soft around the edges. And a lot of mothers will do this. And it's not that you're failing. It's that you're trying to use a system that can't work in your current season. Now, I don't think comparison has to be the thief of joy. I think we can use it as a tool. I think we can look to our previous version of ourselves and go, well, I actually know I'm capable because I've done it before. However, what pieces do I want to take from a previous version of something that I've achieved, whether it be a physique, a fitness level, how you are with nutrition, even in career, right, even in skill. And you take what you've done before and you go, well, what are the parts that I want to carry forward? What are the parts I want to practice in this moment? What are the parts that can serve me here and now? And what do I let go of? Because I had a client last year, she lost 12 kilos during her first year of perimenopause, and she doesn't use HRT or anything like that. She's like, no, I just want to stay completely hormonal free, natural. I'm just gonna white knuckle myself through it. And I will always support whatever decision my clients want to make. I said, all right. And something that I noticed that she did throughout the whole year was she beat herself with this unrealistic expectation of how she thought she should be, based off a previous version of herself, which was 6 years ago when she didn't work, and all she got to do was train all day. She had the luxury of training whenever she wanted. She didn't work, and she certainly wasn't in perimenopause. And so the result that she had over here, losing 12 kilos across the year, as she traveled around the world in non-perfect conditions, it wasn't till I pulled her aside and said, hey, look what you have achieved. You've lost 12 kilos in your first year of perimenopause, traveling all around the country, having chronic stress, having inflammation flare-ups. You've still done this incredible thing. And the pieces that were robbing her of being able to see this incredible result, this is what most people want, to lose 12 kilos of fat. Yet most women give themselves the unrealistic expectation that it's going to be done in 12 weeks, that it's going to be done in 24 weeks. This is the piece that robs most people from true results, is this unrealistic expectation of how they think it's going to go, how they think it should go, and the time frame they give themselves. And that things have to be perfect, and that they have to be perfect, and that the conditions are always perfect. That is robbing you of your success in every area of your life. Be an imperfectionist. Don't let the idea of perfect rob the idea of good. And that's what she was doing. She was putting this expectation on herself, which was unrealistic and unrelenting, really. And because she was comparing herself to a previous version of herself. And when we stripped everything back, which is the beautiful thing about having a coach who doesn't have this emotional attachment to the experience, but can name and acknowledge, hey, I understand this experience that you're having, which is really tough, but let me just show you the lens that you're looking at this through, because damn, if I was looking at myself through that way, I would never be able to meet my own standard either. I get it. I feel you, sister. I said, but look what you are doing. You're practicing the standard that you love living in. You're doing that in your sessions. Does it look different? Yeah, it does. Your season is different. You actually don't have to train 6 days a week. Actually, if you improve the standard of how you show up in your session, you can get the most out of the least. Mothers do this as well. They're trying to live this version of themselves with a baby or a child or children that are so unpredictable, and you're trying to use this system that relies on predictability. And then you feel like you're failing. And you're also doing it most likely dysregulated because you lack sleep. You're unfamiliar with uncertainty. You don't have a good relationship with uncertainty. And so you're met with this unrelenting expectation that you should be doing something differently, or you should be perfect, or you should mother or parent this way. And yet there's no manual for parenting. It literally is, can you do the best that you can? Now, one of the reasons that it is so important that mothers do practice a standard of themselves is because you're modeling for the children around you, but you are the anchor, which feels like that's a really big job, and I bow to you. And so if we can remove an expectation and you can ask yourself, well, what do I want to practice each day? Can I really do the best that I can do in this given moment? And guess what? And say, that is the best that I can do. And guess what? I've actually nailed my standard of practice. Then we can turn down the volume of that judgment. We can turn it down just a notch. So how do we take expectation and standard? We take the pieces that we want to practice and we remove the fact that it has to be exactly the way it was in that previous condition, because we're in a new season. And actually, that will give you better skills and tools because you're going to upgrade the tools. You're not relying on perfect condition or perfect circumstances. You're now developing the tool of adaptability. Now that is a powerful tool. That is a practice. That is a standard. Practice being adaptable. Don't practice being perfect. There's not enough opportunities for that because life is never perfect. And your imagination of what perfect is going to be is going to change. Now, one of my favorite saying is, I'm going to reach for perfection, knowing I'm never going to make it. And I've applied that here. I'm like, I want to reach for perfection, knowing I'm never going to make it. But I also say that playfully because I'm like, shit, that's a really high standard to practice. But I don't want to practice average because then I'll just get average. I want to practice excellence. Now, we can say excellence has a little bit of expectation in it, but only when it's going to be powerful when it's met with a standard of practicing excellence. Now, the final piece to today's episode is what you might notice around the people that you spend your time with. We are a product of the 5 people that we spend most of our time with. And something that you might notice is, what's my expectation of myself, or what's the expectation I put on myself when I'm with certain people? What do I notice about other people's expectation of me as I hang around other people or a particular group? What have you noticed about your own standard of yourself with the people that you hang around? Do you have a low standard of yourself because you notice that your friends have a low standard of themselves? Or do you have a higher standard of yourself? Have you noticed that certain people that you're hanging around, certain podcasts that you're listening to, I hope it's this one, it's leveling you up, that you're going, oh, I want more for myself. I know I'm capable. Actually, I want to raise my standard of myself. I'm going to practice like this. I'm going to start to do this. These are all actions that you choose to take. That's not an expectation. That is a practice. That is a self-led thing that you've decided that you want to do. Now, the expectation that could ruin that is that you have to get it right every time. Or that if it's not right, then it's not good enough. It's like, no. We fail forward. What do you notice about your own standards with the people that you are currently hanging around? And then the next thing is, are these the right people to hang around? Are they helping you raise your standard, or are they keeping it low? Because I certainly know the people that I like to hang around. I love being inspired by them. I love people pulling me forward. I love seeing my friends be successful. It enrolls me into the work. I love it. It gives me fire. I love seeing people be successful. Because I know that's how it leads me. And the last piece to this episode before we wrap up, which I should have said earlier, but it's just come to my mind, is when people say, you've got so much potential. Potential is an expectation that someone's put on you. And when we hear that, we think, oh, someone thinks I've got so much potential. It's great. And it is great. But what happens with potential if there's no practice? It's an expectation that we don't meet, that we feel pressured by, that we feel overwhelmed by, that we actually almost are like scared of. Because all these people have told us how great we could be. What helps us meet that potential? What helps us surpass that potential is we choose the level of standard that we want to practice. It's like a result. The result is the external thing, the imagination of how we think we should be, or we want to get to, or what we think we need to get to. But how do we achieve the result? What determines if we make it there or not is how we practice, the standard of our practice, not just the practice. People can tick the box off and they don't get there because they're just ticking off the box. People who enroll themselves into mastering the process, learning about themselves, having a high standard of their practice, not only do they get the result, they surpass it. Not only do they get the result, they keep it. They develop skill and they say, well, what's the next mountain that I'm going to climb? because it wasn't just blindly led. It wasn't just do the thing and don't think about it. It was, I want to practice to the highest standard of myself. Knowing that each day it's like this, because we have this thing called capacity, and capacity will determine how much we can give in any day, which is why we say, I'm going to do the best that I can do. I did the best that I could, and I didn't negotiate with the best that I could. I literally gave it. And we develop confidence, and we say, I'm self-leading. So, I loved this episode. I really enjoyed talking about it. I really love the difference between the standard versus expectation. And so the thing that I want you to walk away with this is, where in your life do you notice that you have this expectation of yourself? And when you notice it, I want you to name it to yourself. I notice that I have a high expectation here. Then ask yourself, well, do I have a standard of how I meet that? Or is it just this illusion? If you want to meet that expectation, ask yourself, how do I practice getting there? How do I bond expectation and standard and make it something tangible and something that I can practice, so that it's not unrelenting, so that it's not an imagination, and it's not something I just beat myself with and become a self-bully? And then where in your life do you have a standard of practice? How do you like to practice that? And can you raise it? Can you share it with others? Can you be led by others? Are you in a community and place that you notice, yeah, together we raise our own standards? That's what I think about with competing. It's like every time I stepped on stage, we are raising the standard of what it is that a female athlete can do, right? When we look at the best in the world, when they make the unimaginable imaginable, we go, whoa, they've just raised the standard. And I think that is so, so powerful. And we can do that to ourselves, right? We can limit ourselves or we can improve ourselves. And being in a community or a place and space around people that encourage you to raise your standards, that's what you want to do. And that's what we do in Flex Method. We help our clients raise their own standard. We don't have expectations, but we give them standards to practice. We give them levels to move through, tangible things that they can do every day. And what do we say? Thank you for practicing. Tomorrow's another day to practice. Everyone, I hope you loved this episode. Like I said in the beginning, if you are enjoying my episodes, please share them. I really want to build this beautiful community here in the Hattie Boydell podcast, but I also love to hear and see what is resonating with you. Feel free to reach out. I always love a chat and conversation, and I'd love to know what you're really enjoying so I can keep delivering really awesome episodes for you guys to keep embodying and challenging yourself with and shifting your perspective so that you can also be the greatest version of you. Everyone, remember, we have two hands, one for helping ourselves and one for helping others, and I hope you have a fucking wonderful day.